In a world that's been overrun by snowflakes, humanity's last hope is a group of friends with a lot to say.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Clecs podcast, episode 8, I think now, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yep. I'm joined once again with, and would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Hey, I'm Ptolemy. Hello again.
Hi, I'm Fear the Fox. I'm over here.
I am Dark Matter, right back from the shadows again. Man, it's bright in this room.
Hello, I'm Charm Dragons.
Okay, so we're coming back to you again with another episode, as I've just said. We've all introduced ourselves. So the first topic that I want to go into is, have any of you been keeping up with the latest tech and stuff like online on the news or anything like that?
Bits and pieces.
So are any of you aware of the Elon Musk neural net?
Eh?
As soon as you say Elon Musk, I'm just like, wow, this is going to be crazy.
Uh-huh. Care to explain?
It's already been invented, it's already being tested, and many tests have been successful. It is a net that is surgically implanted over the top of your brain. And what it does is, for people who suffer with Alzheimer's, it can bring their memory back. For people who have had a bad accident or something, it can help them recover. And there's also applications being adapted where if somebody severed their spinal cord, it can actually repair their spinal column, make them walk again.
So basically, it's a mind probe to help them function better.
Ish.
That's interesting, to say the least.
I will say, I hope they don't do this as an excuse as trying to cure people of Asperger's. That's going to be interesting because, yeah.
Well, the reason I brought that up is because I've got mixed feelings about it. I was wondering, do you guys think that it's a good or a bad idea? And also, why would you think it's a good or bad idea?
I don't think it's a good idea here because it's not exactly a wise choice of action, right? To play with somebody else's brainwaves. Everybody's in a different mindset, and unfortunately, some of us have got it worse than others. But that's always a bad thing.
Well, you say that, but there are applications as well for it. Like, for instance, one of the mice that they tested, or rat, whatever it was, vermin, that they tested it on. 150 rats they tested it on, right? And 148 were fine. Completely fine. They showed no signs of stress. They showed no signs of anger or even knowing that it was there. However, when they activated what's called the search program for the neural net, the neural net actually diagnosed one of the rats as being female and pregnant, and another rat with having cancer.
So
it could actually diagnose by going through the bloodstream and checking the heart rate and everything. It was basically like a doctor inside your head. That is a good application.
Yeah, that's a good. It's a good application. It still sounds a bit dodgy because that's like inside information. As long as that gets shared to the appropriate offices, it is right. Who will not expose it. That's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going on from what you were saying, Dark, about you hope somebody doesn't use this to try and cure, and I use that word in flying commas, to cure Asperger's, because I know there was a doctor way back in 2010 or around that time, where he was working with children with Asperger's, autism, and other similar conditions on the autistic spectrum, and he was using a drug that's used to treat Alzheimer's to basically try and cure them of their autism. And I don't think he actually got the go-ahead for it, should we say. He tested these kids without testing whether it was ethical. I don't know what became of it because I didn't see anything else about it coming up. But it's it's a tough call because people who have family members who have Alzheimer's and dementia, it's bloody horrible. But then again, are they suggesting it's going to completely heal them, or is it just going to stave off the symptoms for a while before the inevitable happens?
What they're hoping for, what reality and hope are two separate things. We all know that. But what they're hoping for is that basically what Alzheimer's is there's a coating that forms between the electrons in your brain. That's all it is. It's synapses misfiring and not firing at all. What they're hoping to do is get an electrical surge through the neural net that will break down that barrier. So eventually, it's, believe it or not, dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's are all stems of the same condition. If they can actually successfully adapt it where it can actually target the synapses that are misfiring or block them not firing at all, and yet essentially, yes, they could cure Alzheimer's, they could cure Parkinson's, and they could cure dementia.
This reminds me all too much of that film with Robert Williams when they were working on a similar drug.
Oh yeah, I know what film you're on about. I can't remember what it's called. I was talking to Fox about this the other week, actually, but yeah, weren't they? They were victims of an outbreak or something a couple of decades earlier, and the drug they were working on brought them back into a conscious state. But because so much time had elapsed between them going into this coma, they just couldn't cope with the new world that they were in now.
It's too much. It's too much to take in. Yeah. The question, which brings me neatly into the question: even if this did work, right? People with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, right, brought back into the real world, right? Right. How much of an effect on the brain do you think that's going to give them? In all this time gone past, that's a lot for the brain to take in at once. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm reading up on it. I don't understand exactly what it is that they're going to do, because it doesn't look like they're interested in particularly surgery, and surgeons are never want to work on a healthy brain anyway. They with a healthy person. A surgeon is not going to cut somebody open unless there's absolute necessity.
Oh no, it's not going to be surgery. It's syringed.
It looks like they're going to be doing something non-invasive to try and produce the same results, but I'm not exactly sure what the point of it is. They don't seem to know either. There's like, there's hundreds of applications, all these different things we can do, but they're not necessarily focused on one thing, on one direction to go in.
So basically it is all the gear but no idea. Basically.
I think they're just experimenting with the idea of linking a human brain, which is an electrochemical device, to a computer, which is a purely electrical device. There's an interface. It is also
a very fragile piece of material. So you don't want to be mucking around with that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm gonna just mention one thing that will segment into the next point anyway, which is essentially what they're trying to do at the moment is play God.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much the same thing when they're trying to delve into anything slightly fragile. You mentioned, right, and how electrical surges into the brain, right, to help deal with this, right? You try and give, right, an already fully charged battery, right, an electric volt, right, that's going to overload. So you don't want to do that. This is what I mean. You try and do that with somebody's brain, right? That brain will either permanently shut down or it's going to give off severe damage no matter what.
Well, the brain doesn't store electricity in the way that a battery does, or give off electricity as a battery does. It's more that it receives signals from the nervous system. So if you touch something with your finger, there's an electrical
Yes.
impulse on the nerves that
Interpreted.
sends to your brain.
Yeah.
So your brain
Yeah.
receives electrical signals.
and it interprets them. Yeah.
My confusion is that system is, the neural network of your body is designed to specifically understand what's attached to it, and attaching something new to it, I'm not sure how they're going to get past the fact that the brain has no concept of what's communicating with it. So how is it going to interpret like the signal in a sensible way? I'm not sure how they're going to accomplish that, but I'm looking forward to the result.
The base study started off as basically, it was a concept of, wouldn't it be amazing if you had a USB that you could plug into the back of your head, like the Matrix, that basically if you had a prosthetic limb, you could actually control it like you would a real limb, using impulses from your brain, only it would just create a neural pathway that couldn't be there because it had been severed.
That I completely understand. If you've lost your leg and you're able to rewire a leg into the brain, a mechanical leg that works exactly the same as a human leg, it works on the same principles, but you can just wire it back into the brain and bypass the neural system of the body, which obviously isn't going to work anymore, then you've got a working leg, which you can control as if it was your own limb.
It's still working on the whole robotic thing, the modern day technology, right, which will one day take over all of us. So I don't know. I don't know. There are too many plot holes in this whole idea of theirs, and is that unless they come up with a picture of it which does not affect the human in itself, right? Then it's a bit. Yeah, I'd rather not think about it.
We won't know the long-term benefits, and we've also got to remember that historically every invention an attempt has been made to weaponize it anyway. So I'm not going to be afraid of the future just because history repeats itself.
Oh, they're going to weaponize it.
But at the same time, you could enhance things that are poor. For example, if you've got poor eyesight, you could wear glasses the rest of your life, or you could have cybernetic implants, which work just as well as your eyes when you were young, and they were perfectly functional. You can replace things to make them better. Maybe you've got problems with your hands; you can't grip things properly, so you get a cybernetic hand, and then now you can grip things just fine. It's a quality of life thing. Everyone's on an even playing field.
Sometimes the easy way is not always the most sufficient.
Okay, so before we move on to the next subject, Charmed, have you got any input on this one? No. Okay.
Fair enough.
Simple as.
Right, okay, so the next one I touched on just now, saying about playing God. Have any of you heard or know about the God game theory?
The God game theory?
Yeah, it's called Minecraft.
Well, you're not far from the truth, actually.
Oh, bet you weren't expecting that, Doc.
Actually, I was. That's why I said it. Yeah, because Minecraft is basically playing God.
Fair enough.
Being of a religious standing, Ptolemy, this might offend you, so I apologize in advance.
That's all right.
But the God game theory is a theory that basically what we are is we are essentially characters in a massive game.
Okay.
And we're being played by other people, or gods, if you so wish to call it that. So basically, all of our choices are predetermined. We don't know that because we don't know any better. And it's kind of like the Matrix, only a bunch of morons have said that it's their theory on how the world and the universe actually is. So basically, we are a video game.
So basically, we are now revisiting the architect, are we?
It sounds a lot Matrix-esque, doesn't it? But it's actually a real scientific theory. I don't know if it's called the God game theory. It's something like that, but it is an actual scientific theory that none of this is real. It is all a computer simulation, and we are just characters in a game.
It's a hypothesis at most. Theory is a bit strong. There's no evidence for it. But yeah, I can't find anything under God theory or God or game theory, God game theory. I can find God and game theory.
It sounds like somebody's been sitting in the dark for too long.
That's you, Doc.
Yeah, exactly.
You invented it. It's your fault.
But it's a genuine theory that we aren't real. We are just puppets having our strings pulled. And basically, when we die, rather, it's just a case of reboot and reload, and off you go again.
You mean what some people call reincarnation?
Yeah, along the lines of the Buddhist tradition of reincarnation. But at the same time, it is a genuine scientific theory that we aren't actually here. We are just a simulation in another person's game.
I will add something to this. During my younger, like about 6 or 7 years ago, when I was living over in High Wycombe, I did do some brainstorming over this, and I put into my mind as like a film reel, for example, right? Everything basically plans out for you, and basically all you're doing is just running a film.
Yeah.
Every single frame in him, right, depicts a certain moment in your life. And I've so like taking a photo, you're taking one of those frames and keeping it for yourself, right? The thing is, in his right, whoever's playing this film, I don't know, all right. I obviously knows what's happening. Knows what is happening, right? But the thing is, right, that's all they know, right? Nobody knows anything from before they were born, and nobody knows anything after they die. Basically, it's black to black.
Or is it?
I don't know. That's the thing.
Exactly. We don't know. We don't actually remember the trauma of birth, and psychologists will always say, or psychiatrists rather, will always say that it is trauma. That's why we don't remember it. You think about it, your skull when you're born is crushed down, which is why a baby's head has got a little hole in the top of it. It's because their skull had to be formed that way because of the birth canal. It was crushing the skull. So that's got to be traumatic. So because of it being such a trauma, that is why we don't remember our birth.
No, it's just brain. No, it's just brain damage. When you think about it, the human brain only uses about 10 or 15% of it. What was the brain like back in the womb?
That has been disproved. The idea that the brain there's only like a small percentage of the brain. If you look at the electrical impulses within the brain, it can go pretty high, like 90% of the brain can be active at any given time if your brain is doing everything at once. It's just that if you were doing that, if you were like running at full capacity, your brain would probably overheat and you'd collapse.
All right. Let me rephrase that. 10%, 50%, right, on certain topics, right? 10% on this, 10% on that, 10% on this, 10% on that, and have, right, as you know, all in conjunction with each other. So basically, you're still using 100% of the brain, but in separate segments. It's depending on what you are doing. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What you are thinking, and then it had multiple tasks at once, and has been able to have it even something as movement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I know there's the odd person out there who claims to remember being born.
Yeah.
But the thing is, right, all these thoughts, right, is conjoined, right, into the brain, right? The brain itself is one of those muscles that allows you to think for yourself, to move. It's basically the living motor of our bodies, right?
Yeah.
If we did not have that, we would not survive, right? And all these all these thoughts, these computer simulations, or these electrical impulses, right, that are interpreted by the brain right, gives us these ideas. It is right that there is life. That I don't know how we're trying to find out who the creator of us is, or where we go after this life is over. Right. So basically, once you ask the question, is the brain doing this, right, to keeping it to tell us the truth, or is it trying to block something?
Exactly. I mean, for all we know, when we die, we could see a big flash of light and then a reloading sign come up. Game over. We don't know, do we?
Or we just stop existing. It's probably more likely.
Well, yeah.
I mean, before I was born, I didn't exist. And I can't remember what that was like because I didn't exist. But I can imagine that perhaps not existing is a thing I've already done. There was quite a lot of time has passed where I didn't exist, and I'll just go back to doing that.
The question is though, do you really want to know?
I don't care.
Point in knowing what can you do.
Exactly. What can you do about it? Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, people are fascinated by the unknown because they can invent things that, can't be proven one way or the other. You can never disprove something.
And it kills a few hours of boredom. Yeah.
It's just curiosity. It's natural curiosity. We get very creative and inventive and imaginative, and we throw things together and call them, religions and things. And we just go, yep, that must be right because it sounds okay. Anything
to help you cope, basically.
We're also natural followers. If somebody stands up and says, I know what's going on, you look up to them. This has been tested again. Tests have been done where you have somebody giving you orders and instructions. You are far more likely to respond to that person and just trust everything they say if they wear a lab coat. Simple as that. You just look up to them and go, well, you must know what you're talking about, so I'll do whatever you ask me to, even when they ask you to do crazy things.
My physics teacher wore a lab coat. I didn't believe a word he said.
As regards this whole, theory that we are in a video game, what does that make Charmed? A bug?
Well, I was going to say, I'd love to meet the dull fucker who's playing me, because he certainly ain't playing me, right? Because, I've had a shit time lately.
It also kind of sounds like the whole fate argument repackaged. And I was really fascinated by fate when I was growing up. There was there were a few ideas which were thrown around as to how things worked. But the way that I looked at it was like, there are certain events in life that are unavoidable because they're just bound to happen. Life is a pattern of events. And if you think about the way we work, we react to stimulus. So if the same stimulus comes around again, we'll probably react the same way and do the same thing. And just as a hive of all the people in the world, we'll probably all sort of start to follow those patterns because we're influenced by others that are also following the patterns. And again, history will then start to repeat itself. But we're doing this because we're reacting to stimulus in the same way. Same input, same output. Same, it's as simple as that. So I think that there are certain points in life which are unavoidable because you're working towards them. And I would say visualize it like this. Imagine a giant cork board. And you're sticking pins in that cork board in different places. Those pins represent things in your life that you have to do. Those pins going across that cork board, that is the path that you will take. However, how you get to those paths, imagine tying a string to each one, but you've got loads of slack. And that's all the time you've got in life. And you can use as much slack to get between the pins as you like. You can stretch them, you can pull them, you can push them, you can twist them around, make a little S curve or whatever. You can go from A to B in whatever way you want. From one pin to the next pin, you can do that whatever you want to, but you're going to hit that pin. You're going to get there eventually because life is just going to steer you that way. Other people are going to steer you that way, We like to think that we have the freedom to do what we want to do, but there are others who also want to do that too, and they're going to stop you.
There is no such thing as freedom. No such thing. Everything is controlled by what your mind tells you, basically. You're right. The closest thing you have, the closest thing you have to control, right? Or the closest thing to God, I suppose, right? Is that brain of yours.
You can only control yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, you are the only you're the only control you have over anything. The only influence that you have over anything is your own influence. If other people change their minds and do something different, well,
yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Basically, your mind is the only weapon that controls everything your body does. So, yeah.
So you can choose to go with the flow of everyone else, Or you can have the freedom. You can choose free will and go, I'm going to go in a different direction, but you'll go alone. Because humanity is not designed to, go alone. We're designed to follow. It's what we do.
There was no. There was. There is no freedom when control is involved. So, so basically, and since the brain functions the rest of the body, right? How can there be freedom at all?
Hi guys, this is Jay. I'd like to apologize during this podcast because whilst we were recording, my computer decided to have some sort of malfunction and shut down during recording. So I took over onto my mobile or cell phone onto the VoIP that we currently use so as I could carry on with the podcast. So I apologize for the sound quality changing, but I promise you that it won't happen too often again. Next topic is a bit more of a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think there will be a colony either on the moon or Mars? It's being talked about. I believe it's going to happen within our lifetimes. What do you think?
I'd agree. I think that there's certainly a lot of pressure to try and do something in space. We kind of had the space race and we've been to the moon, but we've never been a manned mission as far as Mars. That's certainly going to be the next thing, is getting people to set foot on Mars, and then perhaps to make life easier because of the size of the size of the moon and therefore the lower gravity. If you were able to fly to the moon and then launch yourself off to somewhere else, it's going to save you a lot of fuel launching from the moon rather than launching from the Earth. So it simply makes more sense to build a base on the moon that you can then refuel and send off again to wherever it is you're going on your final destination.
Yeah.
You need some rather interesting delivery service to pull that one off.
I think that's what they're going to build. I think there's going to basically be like a space train system, or
Uber,
like a truck system. Think trucks, where they'll send materials, resources, and personnel to the moon to maintain a practically self-automated base with this sort of skeleton crew that can refuel and repair anything that lands, and then send them on their way. And from there, we'll get a lot further.
Amazon is going to get in on that.
Possibly.
There's some big players in the world, to be fair. There are some very big players. I know that Richard Branson is certainly looking for a method of getting civilians to the moon as a trip. That's something that he would like to do in people's lifetimes, to actually fly to the moon just for the experience of leaving the Earth's atmosphere. That would be awesome. Our first steps into the unknown.
But all those astronauts, right? And I had to go through all that severe training, right, to help cope with the journey, right? Would that mean all those people, right, who wanted to go up to the moon just for a day trip would have had to go through that as well?
Perhaps rudimentary training. They wouldn't need as much, though, because if you think about the very first steps that we take into space, we had no idea what we were doing. We were learning things for the very first time. We're experiencing things for the very first time. We had the maths down. We had the science was already there, but we didn't really understand what we were getting into. And a lot of things were learned as a result of that. I think over time, you could make that whole process streamlined and a lot safer for people with just some rudimentary training, instructions. Like if you get on a plane, they'll stand at the front and they'll explain how this works. This is the safety procedures, this is the protocol, this is what you do if this happens. I think that's basically what we're looking at. It's going to be a little bit more comprehensive to go to space, but but how hard can it be?
Well, it hasn't been done in a long time, so I'm assuming fucking hard.
Japan has mentioned that they are not far away from being able to send people to the moon.
I mean, then again, they could stop off at the ISS, which is halfway there. You can't tell me that all the tons of fuel it takes to get out of the atmosphere, right? You can't tell me it's going to take equally as much to get from the ISS to the moon. There's no gravity, or at least there's substantially less.
Essentially, it's going to get easier.
Until they come up with their own technology, right, of we all get to go to space, I guess I was going to settle with my feet on the ground here.
I don't know about everybody going to space. That might take a very, very long time. Mars, on the other hand, that's a different ball game altogether. Mars is an extremely hostile planet. Sandstorms that could strip the flesh from your bone. It's not necessarily the right place for a holiday, and it's certainly not somewhere that we could build anything substantial.
Yeah, not to mention, what is it, the largest volcano in our solar system.
Olympus Mons. It's also very, very cold. And we don't necessarily think about this, but like Mars is intensely cold. It's never positive, I don't think. In terms of the centigrade. It's never in the positives. It's always in the negatives, and sometimes extreme negatives. It can be very, very cold on the surface of Mars.
You can guarantee that they'll try and fucking weaponize that. Sending the what's it called, prisoners to the moon, because their punishment for stepping out of line would be to flesh from their bones.
Isn't that the plot of Total Recall?
Well, no, they get all of the air sucked out of their body. It's completely different.
That's just about as equally as
Horrifying.
Yes. Hey, that's an idea.
What's that?
Space camp for kids, for parents who cannot get rid of them.
Like a Martian boarding school.
Yeah.
Who's camp leader? Marvin the Martian.
Oh, that makes me so angry.
Problem is, we're running out of room down here. We're going to have to start eating into resources of natural beauty beyond, our walls, if you like. I know we're not necessarily living in castles, but you know what I mean. We've got to expand to deal with our expanding population. It was maybe 20 years ago we had 5 billion people on the planet. Now it's like 8? It's crazy how fast we're expanding. And we've got to have room for these people, and life is not going to be healthy if we're all overcrowded.
So you're saying that Earth is not doesn't have a wider ratio for the human population.
I'm saying it would be easier on the Earth itself if a lot of us weren't here.
You're volunteering, folks?
That's also called natural selection.
What's it going to do? Just kind of squeeze itself out like a sponge and get rid of some of the population?
We already did it. You remember, history repeats itself. Where do you think Australia came from?
Ooh, yeah, good point. That was prison ships.
I mean, if you really want to get rid of some population, just, build something, build a holiday resort and timeshare it.
I'm so sorry to our Australian listeners, but yeah, you're all prisoners. You're all ex-cons. Sorry to
descended from.
Hey, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck,
Oh dear.
Yeah, because according to my friend's daughter, a duck goes fuck.
Close enough. I thought that was rabbits.
Yeah. Don't let Jay with a zero punctuation hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, there's a great example on a really good movie which I suggest because I highly recommend it. It's a great movie. Not Dante's Peak. It was the third one of the Brown movies. You had Angels and Demons. You had the Da Vinci Code.
Oh,
third one. Dante's
is it Inferno?
Inferno, that's it. Yeah. And basically, this scientist says that treat human like bacteria, right? So if you have a pint jug and you put a tiny layer of bacteria in the bottom of the jug, in 48 hours that'll be a little bit thicker. In another 48 hours it'll be even thicker. When the jug gets half full, within 4 hours the jug will be overflowing because the bacteria is constantly splitting all the time. And that is the growth of humanity. The jug is the Earth. Eventually, we're not going to have anywhere to go.
We'll end up in China.
Eventually, we are going to run out of resources. It's already happening. It's only a matter of time. We do have to find another planet to inhabit, which is why they've sent the Hades or the Hercules probe out, and it's constantly finding constellations that have got Goldilocks, and I use that in air quotes, Goldilocks zone planets. The Earth is in a Goldilocks zone. Basically, it's not too close to the sun where we're like Venus and we're just scorched, and we're not too far from the sun that we're frozen or a gas giant. We are just in the right area for life to exist.
Well, let's just hope these people, right, who search for these planets, right, don't quite interfere and end up in the same way as Goldilocks did.
Robert the Three Bears.
Don't understand. Goldilocks got eaten by a bear.
Yeah, and basically interfering with the culture of other planets, if there is such a life out there, and it right could spell doom for the human race. You know what I mean?
Only if that life is superior, and that doesn't seem to be the case.
There are microscopic signs that there is life in other planets, because we're still getting feedback from the Voyager probe, which was sent out in the 70s, I believe. That is bringing back radio signals from a constellation that we can't yet find. And these radio signals, we don't know where they're coming from, but for them to be radio signals, it means they are being transmitted, and no one knows where those transmissions are coming from.
Interestingly, static, when you're listening to radio waves within the radio band frequencies and you're listening to static, it has been suggested that the static that you're hearing is actually the echo from the Big Bang.
Yeah, it's very possible.
That's what the noise actually is.
Somebody watching the Big Bang.
Or if you were to follow a televised description by Stephen Hawking, the past is pear-shaped. Yeah, I don't expect any of you to get that, so never mind.
Maybe if someone up there, right, actually praises Sheldon for being a god of knowledge.
Possibly.
You know, in my opinion, humanity is ignorant if they think that we are the only life form in an infinite universe. If it is in fact infinite, we don't know. There could be, it could be an end. We could pop out the other side and end up in a giant man's living room for all we know. We could be a speck of dust. But what I'm saying is, in an infinite world, in an infinite universe with an infinite amount of stars, in our Milky Way alone, you look up into the night sky, that's half the stars in our Milky Way. That's one galaxy. And we already know of other galaxies. I mean, we're on a collision course with the Andromeda galaxy. That's two galaxies. There's got to be life.
You're starting to sound like Mulder from X-Files.
Well, the thing is, see, it's common sense at the end of the day, isn't it?
Life, yes, I accept absolutely. They're because of the conditions for life on Earth. It was a unique set of circumstances, but completely unique anywhere, everywhere. I mean, yeah, it's difficult to say that this couldn't happen on another planet. So life, certainly, and we've certainly seen signs that life can exist given the correct conditions. And there are certainly planets out there, as you say, with the Goldilocks planets, which do have the correct conditions in other systems. So it seems very, very likely that a few of those will have life, perhaps microbial, maybe even a little bit more interesting than microbial. But little green men with probes? Come on, get out of here.
No, I didn't say that.
No, I know, but we're not. I think we're again going wishful thinking. We're getting imaginative and going like, ooh, aliens. Whereas I think the reality is probably going to be some really interesting bacteria.
I personally wouldn't trust. I personally wouldn't trust the human race with another planet. We've already fucked ours up.
Exactly, and that's where my point goes full circle to the arrogance of humanity. We are too arrogant to even admit that we are killing ourselves slowly. We are essentially the frog that's being slowly boiled to death inside the saucepan. We need to get the fuck out or turn the ring off before we boil to death, because it's going to happen. I mean, I'm not a peace hippie or a vegan or a vegetarian. I'm a red-blooded male. I eat red meat. I drive a gas guzzler.
Yeah.
Yes, but your red meat is usually still fucking mooing on the plate.
That's probably not relevant to the point Jay's trying to make. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, it is, and it kind of backs up my point, to be honest, because I'm practically a modern age caveman. I don't look after my health. I'm not a fitness, health, and eco nut then. But I can still see that something needs to change, because in 100 years, we ain't going to be here. I mean, none of us will be here anyway, but humanity won't be here in 100 years if we don't do something. And if we are here, we're going to be fucking bad. We're going to be ill.
The only thing that is certain in existence is oblivion. So, what is this? So the plans can be made, right, to further strengthen humanity's existence, right? And that's as far as they can possibly go. Or they can actually put their foot forward and let us live for about another 100 years, right?
Yeah.
This is very nihilistic.
Yes.
But eventually, right, like most other species, right, come and gone, right. Every single species has a time limit. So
Kind of.
again, it will technically go down to natural selection.
See,
Technically,
history teaches us this, but history doesn't contain us at our current stage. We've never had this before, so we're trying to learn from history and guess at what's going to happen next. And I think that we are missing one of the most important things, is that we have really, as a species, stopped evolving.
Yeah.
We don't need to evolve because our evolution isn't how we're getting further. Technology is how we're getting further, which echoes back to the sentiments of, well, what if we can use our technology to enhance ourselves? Yeah, I guess this whole thing kind of comes around into a nice, neat loop in that you can just use the technology that you have developed to artificially evolve the human species, to be able to cope with new environments, to be able to deal with new surroundings, to be able to colonize another planet. And technology is something that we really do need to embrace, whether, the hippie sorts who are just like, no, man, you need to go like really natural, dude, and eat the plants. I think
Hug a tree.
that's stereotypical.
I think that what you're kind of missing is that we could have done that thousands of years ago, but now we can't, because if we did, then our population would diminish. We could lose like 60-80% of our population overnight simply because we scrap all the technologies. How many of us would actually be able to survive without that technology? We need it.
On the plus side of that, right? If about 800 of us did die out or something like that, I don't know what the figures are. There'd be a little bit more space on Earth for all of us, wouldn't there?
True, but there's an ethical question there of, could you make that decision? Because the people who wouldn't be able to cope without our technology would be the infirm, the elderly, the disabled. Those people would just die off immediately. So that decision would be killing them.
But then again, us as a human species has also been known to adapt. So we can shape the world around us depending on the situation.
I don't think we've ever adapted. I mean, our technology has. Have we?
We have, but we just haven't done it for so many years.
You can look around to different cultures and countries, and you can see the differences with anything from the color of the skin, hair color, eye color, the cheekbones. You can see structurally that there are differences with the builds of people. People in the East are shorter. There's all sorts of things that make a huge difference to your environment because that's where you are. But we haven't really done that. We're developing our technology so fast that evolution can't possibly catch up, because there's not time for more than even within one person's lifetime, the generation. Within that one generation, technology will have changed so many times that evolution doesn't have a chance of catching up.
Well, I'm going to touch on something that we all are, as far as I believe, which is autism. How do we know that's not a form of evolution?
It kind of is. What's the word I'm looking for? So basically it's a mutation, and mutations are how we evolve. So when something mutates, it's either going to mutate in a good way or a negative way, and if it's a negative, then it dies out because it failed and it doesn't get to reproduce, and if it's a positive, then it does extremely well for itself and it gets to reproduce.
Or it overpopularizes the previous species.
I mean, if something is successful, to throw back to a really common analogy that's made, you've got an animal that lives in the grass, and it's really, really small, and it runs around in the grass and it gets eaten all the time because it can be seen in the grass. You've got a mutation that makes that animal even smaller. Well, now it needs less food to survive, and it can hide in the grass. You've got another mutation that makes the animal bigger, and now it can look over the grass and it can see predators coming, and it develops to run very, very fast because it's taller now, so it can get away from the predator and it can see it coming. Both of these strategies work just fine, but you end up with two completely different animals from the same original species, and that is evolution. We aren't doing that anymore. We are human. We have been human for the longest time. We don't really need to adapt to a challenge, because anytime a challenge comes along, we invent something that takes the challenge away. So the body just relaxes, throws back its arms and goes, yeah, wake me in another 100 years when I've got something to do. You know?
Oh, you know what would strengthen the life of the human, right? Of the human species.
What's that?
It would also further the evolution line, right? Melding the DNA of us with the DNA of turtles or tortoises.
Huh?
Tortoises live up to about 200 years.
Yeah, but then we just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles then.
Basically.
Heroes in a half shell.
They also don't eat very much, and they metabolize extraordinarily slowly, and they have bugger all energy. They can't really move very fast.
They're charmed.
They live a long time because they don't burn any energy.
Yeah, pretty much the human race today.
Well, we burn a lot of energy. Well, we certainly take in a lot of energy.
I've got to say, though, Fox, your analogy scared the absolute crap out of me, because my brain went straight to a 6-foot-tall fucking rabbit that's ripped to hell.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound a bit like Donnie Darko?
What's that?
No, not quite.
No, it kind of sounds more like the opposite of
Roger Rabbit.
No, the Holy Grail.
Oh,
I really want to find a picture of Hulk Hogan with a bunny nose.
Right. Seeing as we're very, very, very close to our end time, I'm going to throw one more in, okay? Just because I think we can all, we touched on the fact that all of us are autistic in a certain way, and that's not being derogative to autistic people before the keyboard warriors start jumping on. Where, we are all being genuine and serious when we say we do have a version. I mean, pretty much all of us in this group at the moment anyway have got Asperger's, which is a form of autism. Now, speaking from my personal experience, and I'm sure you guys can collaborate and agree with me on this one, education, the education system and the judgment of intellect. In Britain, the education system, they don't adjust for, or they didn't when I was in school, for autism. So basically, your way of learning is wrong in the eyes of the education system. Do you guys get the point I'm trying to make? Because I don't think I'm making it correctly.
The education system, right, is there to teach you the things that they want you to know. For those who think outside the box, it's a little bit. You find yourself a bit harder to adapt because you don't agree with what they think. So, and vice versa.
The education system is literally all about teaching you how to pass exams.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's telling you how to pass a piece of paper that have got preset questions on it. It's got fuck all to do with life. You're not going to know any. You're not going to need to know any of it once you leave school.
I can't even remember any of the lessons I was taught in school because all of it was just so boring.
There's a very famous saying, and I'm going to give someone brownie points if they can come up with the scientist who said this, which is, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Okay. I'd guess Darwin, but...
No, it was later than Darwin.
Einstein?
And the meaning behind that is a case of, a fish is a highly evolved creature. It's taken millions of years to be good at what it does. But you take that fish out of the water and tell it, right, you are being tested on your ability to climb a tree like that monkey, because you're both animals, so therefore you've both got the same abilities. You stick that monkey in the sea and you stick that fish on land and tell it to climb a tree, they're both going to die because they're out of their comfort zones. They're out of their habitats. That doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. That means they're intelligent in different ways. And this is where the education system is lacking.
I get what you're saying, and I agree. The whole idea of teaching you every single subject and expecting you to excel in all of them is ridiculous, because you're never going to need all of those skills, and you're never going to have all of those skills. If you had all of those skills, you would be good at everything but master of nothing. To be able to actually excel in life, you have to have lived, and you don't get to live until you're like 16 in this country. You get to actually go out and do something for yourself, but you don't have any skills. You've got no life skills. You've got fantastic knowledge of pointless things that you're not actually going to use in a career, but you don't have any life skills.
That's why there used to be home economics classes.
Life is the greatest teacher of all, basically.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can only tell you from personal experience, school taught me nothing. In fact, for the last 18 months or so at school, I was tortured by the tutors. There was actual torture techniques being implemented because I was not keeping up with my work. I just couldn't deal with all of the crap that I didn't see the point of. So they tortured me. They forced me to do things like stand in front of a wall for 15 minutes without moving, that kind of thing. That's a great education, that's fantastic life lessons. After I left school, I learned everything I needed to know about life. And then I went out into the world and I thought, you know what, I'm interested in this. And then I started researching it. I learned it myself.
Yeah.
Because we can. We're all capable of doing it. The idea that we all have to be filtered through an education system and that we all need to learn a certain way. We don't, though, do we? You learn differently to me. Some people learn in a visual way.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, we're all just battery hens, aren't we? We're made to learn the same thing as everybody else. When I was in school, my main three subjects that I excelled at, and none of you are going to be surprised by this, were physical education, PE. I was very good at rugby. Obviously, my size has something to do with that. I'm 6'4" and I'm built like a train. So,
Bowling ball, but never mind.
Hey. Fucking hell.
Carry on, Jay.
All right, Pinocchio, chill out now. Science, I was very, very good at biology and chemistry, which was weird because I was shit at maths, and chemistry and maths kind of go hand in hand. Physics, sorry, I was good at physics.
Yeah, physics.
Physics and maths go hand in hand. And the third one I was exceptionally good at was woodwork and tool work and metal work and using my hands. And I've excelled at that ever since, using my hands. I mean, all of you know here, I can say this on this podcast because I no longer work in that industry now, but I was a very good builder at one time, and I'm qualified as a plasterer and a bricklayer, and I'm very good with my hands.
Came in like a wrecking ball.
Yeah. Oh, we're all on the bandwagon tonight, aren't we?
He was seen twerking on the scaffolding.
Yeah, I've seen him bouncing off the scaffolding.
Smashing a rebar into his leg twice in the same day and then going, ouch, that hurt.
Yeah.
You were saying very good builder. Yeah.
Fuck you. But I didn't learn any of that in school. I mean, the woodwork, I kind of made a wonky jewelry box for my aunts, and I mean really wonky. But I was in year 7, which for the American viewers, year 7 is your first year of comprehensive school, which in your country you'd call high school. So you have primary school, which is like preschool ages. So that's 5 till 10.
Year 7, you'd be like 11.
Yeah, 11 or 12. Well, I was.
Yeah, you'd be 11, turning 12 in year 7.
Yeah. So in year 7, one of my assignments was to make a little wooden jewelry box with like plywood and a little bit of 2x1, right? It was really wonky, you know. I was 11 or 12 years old, you know, but I excelled at metalwork. You know, I could attach weights, and we probably all had this assignment where you had to make a something that stood on a pinnacle and it had a weight on either side and just balanced. I made one of them perfectly well. Didn't even need the teacher's help, you know. But my building skills, I didn't learn them until I left school. And most of what I learned for my building work wasn't in college. I learned it before I went to college, because myself and Charm, we grew up essentially on a farm. So we already had that knowledge of how to use our hands, how to, you know, my family always had a great motto, which was, if you can keep yourself clean, you can keep yourself fed, and you can keep a vehicle on the road and a roof over your head, you don't need anything else. Everything else above that is just a bonus. As long as you've got those 4 base components, you will survive.
Bit of trivia for you. You know, with babies, right? And babies, right, have a natural sixth sense, right? They can tell. They can tell where everything. They can tell. Well, they can see things that we can't.
Yeah.
Right. But they lose that when you hit about 5 years old. Right.
Yeah.
And the main reason for that is like what happens when you hit 5 years old?
Start going to school.
School. Fucking hell, you were 5?
Yeah, you go straight to school. Yeah.
Not where I'm from, you don't.
Your mind gets filled.
4.
It's 4 now, is it?
No, I went to school at 3.
Oh, you went to crash, did you?
No, I went to school.
And irrespective, right? As soon as you went to school, right? Those education itself kind of pushes all that out. So, and as you say, a lot of it, right? It has no significance to our everyday life. So, I know that a lot of parents are going to say a lot of crap about this, right? But if parents did not take their children to school, right, would they still maintain that sixth sense?
That is a good question. But I mean, you know, the education system, it does have its pros as well as its cons. You know, it teaches children how to socialize with other children. It certainly boosts their immune systems. You know, it teaches how you can cope in a crowd, which was always a big problem for me. You know, I had serious issues with crowds. It wasn't until I started doing local theatre and stuff like that I got over my fear of being in crowds. I still get aggravated now if I'm in a massive crowd of people. But going a bit further on from that, another thing that I've noticed a lot, and it bugs the crap out of me, because for some reason us lot seem to have a different way of thinking to, you know, the general sheep out there. But like you watch a game show, a TV show like the Got Talent ones, you know, the America, Australia, Britain's Talent, all those. And there'll be this gem of a person stood on stage who's got the most amazing voice, and the judges will be like, "Wow, you're the best singer in the world. Where have you been hiding?" They don't know that they're the best singer in the world because they don't know everybody in the world. So why the fuck say that? Because at the end of the day, there might be somebody else out there who's far better but undiscovered because it's not of an interest of theirs.
It's entertainment jargon. They don't mean they're probably already well aware of this, right? But they got to keep the hype going.
Well, I'm fascinated by the way people learn, and one of the telling things for me was when I sat down with Jay, and he was getting interested in lighting, and in a lot of lighting, you need to understand how to configure and set up these lights. You need to have a rudimentary understanding of binary, and he sat there shaking his head like, "I'm never going to learn binary. Binary is really hard. I don't know how to deal with this." So I said, "Give me 5 minutes. And I'll teach you binary." He's like, "Nah, you can't. I mean, the whole education system tried to teach me maths, and it's not my subject. I don't do maths." But I sat down with him, and I sort of started explaining it in a more visual way. I drew out, you know, what was actually going on, and he looked at that piece of paper and was just like, "I get it." I get it. This makes sense. And it was just like a magical moment to actually see somebody who clearly throughout their entire life had never actually been taught the right way, so had no expectation that they could learn, and actually really capable of learning, very capable of learning anything. I think it gave a new lease of life.
You have to be motivated, right, to want to know something, right? If you have lessons like, chucked down your throat, right, which you have no specific interest in, you're not going to take very much attention to it.
Well, it wasn't a case of I wasn't prepared to learn. It's just I'm going to use a real example from my maths class, right? Again, year 8, I think it was. I was really behind on my math, and I was being taught my 9 times table, 9, 18, 27, 36, blah, blah, blah.
There's actually there's an easy way of doing that. There's an easy way of doing that, just using your fingers.
Yeah, I know. But again, that system didn't work with me. Now, the way my brain works is I see patterns in everything. Okay? If I can see a pattern, I can make sense of what I'm looking at, right? So anyway, going back to the story, they were saying add 10 and take 1 away. For some reason, now that I've figured out the 9 times table, I get what they mean. But I was adding 10 and taking 1 away, and I was always coming up with the wrong number because I was doing it wrong. But then I showed them, when I figured out how to do it after the summer holidays, which is like spring break in America, when I came back, I'd figured out the 9 times table because I'd looked and looked and looked and looked and looked at the timetables until I saw a pattern. And if you go from top to bottom on the first column and bottom to top in the second column and just write the same numbers backwards, you've got the 9 times table, right?
That's how I did it.
I showed my workings out to my teacher, and she said, "No, I'm failing you on that. You've done it wrong."
If you have done it, no matter what your method, if you have come out with the correct result, you are never wrong.
Yeah, but it wasn't her way of doing it. That's the whole point.
Oh, I know, and I'm familiar. That's the way that schools work, and it's why schools are such a negative influence on children. Is that they will impose their way of doing things. I don't see why parents can't teach children.
Well, they can. My fiance was taught by her mother and she was homeschooled. And she's a very intelligent person.
If you've got somebody who's knowledgeable and capable of teaching, then they should teach you. And they shouldn't need to be, in a classroom teaching everybody. We should all muck in. We should all have something to say because we can educate each other. And as a species, become more intelligent, become more involved, and maybe spend some quality time with your kids. That might help.
I wouldn't homeschool my children because I'm thick as shit.
Well, no, we've all got skills, Charmed. I mean, you could teach your child a lot from, me and you have known each other from birth. I know you've got some skills you could teach your child that would be very beneficial to her.
Practical things that wouldn't be taught in a school. How do you actually do this? That's how you teach. Sometimes,
we all give you shit for it because we're bantering and stuff, but you are a very good cook. You could teach your child how to cook, and she would have that skill, and she'd be able to carry that with her for the rest of her life, and she'd be able to survive on her own.
I can teach her all about independence, right? How to do things, how to do things by herself.
How about just seeing the world? Like, go out and look at things, go on holiday to exotic places and say, look, this is the planet we're on, rather than just read about it in a book in some dusty, dingy classroom.
So basically, right, I could teach it. Basically, the one thing I can teach my daughter, right, is about life lessons from her experiences,
which will be a far better education than the education system we've got currently.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a naturally nice guy. I mean, like, I don't think there's anybody out there who has a good reason to hate me.
Keep thinking.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. I got a bit of a sharp tongue, like with that bowling ball hole analogy. Thank you. But yeah, but yeah, that's one of those things, isn't it?
It's a bit of banter between friends, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it's called humor.
Yeah, that's something that needs to be taught in schools these days. How to take a fucking joke.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you offended me. I'm going to make sure you can never be spoken to or heard from again. Go fuck yourself. You offend me with your face.
And on that note, shall we wrap up?
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. So thank you everybody for joining in for another podcast. For you listening in the audience, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, Twitter, Facebook, and of course Patreon. Now I've added another tier to Patreon, which is for anybody out there who's got a small business or has got something that they want us to advertise. It's a $50 one-off payment, and you can either send us a script and we will get one of our best spoken podcasteers to do an edited version that we'll then do in post-edit and then put it in. So basically there won't be any background noise, there won't be anybody jumping in or anything like that. It'll be done privately away from the recording, recorded separately, and then inserted into our podcast. You can either send us a script, which if you contact us through Patreon or through Facebook, we can give you our details for you to send us a script. Or if you just tell us what the product is, what the name of the company is, contact details, etc., what you want us to do, and we will plug it for you. And it's just $50 pledge. That's all it is. Also, there is a discussion going to be happening after this podcast about taking over on Twitch, because we are going to be starting to do a live stream every week, or as close to every week as we can, by different members, so as we can interact live with our audience and get to know you better, and you can get to know us a bit better outside of the podcast, because I understand, at the moment we are just voices over internet provider. So yeah, thank you for your support and thank you for listening. And I'm going to hand off to everybody else now to say goodbye. But I'm Jay and I'm signing off. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care of yourselves.